Hello everyone! Happy New Year!
Yeah!
Although it's a couple of days late, this is still a perfectly good time to sit down, drink a cup of hot chocolate, because it's also a good time to treat yourself, and reflect on the past year and set our intentions for the year going forward. I'm sure you've been bombarded with videos just like this one, but trust me, this one's gonna be really, really good. Here we go. The 10 biggest lessons I learned in 2021 that I'm taking into 2022. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Dami and I'm a licensed architect in beautiful Vancouver, BC. On this channel, we talk about architecture and design and some tools and strategies that can help us have more meaningful and fulfilling careers in architecture. So the first lesson has to do with protecting your time, specifically your deep work time. So when I was doing my end of year reflections, I realized that holy shit, the channel grew from 1,000 to 100,000 subscribers this year. And thank you for that. Of course, it's not just about the metrics. It's been an incredibly fulfilling year, and I feel like I've really grown as a human being and as a professional. And if there's one thing, like one single thing that's really propelled this growth for me and made all of this possible, while, by the way, having a pretty demanding full-time job as an architect, it is my 2.5 hours of morning deep work sessions before I officially start work. So when I started this YouTube channel, I felt like I was doing a million things, but I didn't really feel like I was making a lot of progress. You might have noticed that my posting schedule was pretty sporadic in the early days of the channel. Then I came across this idea of deep work from a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, where he argues that the ability to do deep work is one of the most valuable and rare skills in this super competitive economy. And if there's one skill we should try to actively develop right now, it's the ability to do deep work. Deep work is the ability to do focused work without distraction on tasks that are cognitively demanding. And a deep work session is anywhere between 1 to 4 hours of continuous, undisturbed work on a single task. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, I have a full video on it. I'll leave it right here. So since my evenings are usually a little bit of a mess with my work schedule, I set up my deep work sessions right in the mornings. And I tried this for 90 days at the beginning of the year. And it's had a pretty big impact on my life, I would say. I was able to make videos pretty consistently, and I didn't really feel the need to do work in the evenings because I'd already finished my most important tasks. I've actually never really considered myself a morning person. After doing this consistently, I've kind of come to truly, really enjoy these first 2 hours of my day. It's become kind of a non-negotiable for me. The second lesson is called the 80% rule, and it has to do with perfectionism. James Clear talks about the story in his book, Atomic Habits, where a photography professor divided his class into one side would be the quantity group. They would be graded on the amount of work they produced. And the other side would be the quality group. And they would be graded on the excellence of their work. Meaning, if they wanted an A, they had to create an almost perfect image. At the end of the year, he found that all of the best photos were produced by the quantity group because these students were taking photos every single day and they were experimenting and they were like testing the light conditions and the composition, and that process helped them hone their skills. And the quality group, on the other hand, instead of iterating, they just spent a lot of time speculating on what a perfect image is. And in the end, they had very little to show. I really love the story, but If you are a perfectionist, this can kind of put you in a trap of like trying to make a large quantity of perfect work. Even though I know deep inside that there's like diminishing returns the longer I work on something, it's just hard to define a stopping point. But then I read this thing about aiming for 80% before you ship a product. And when I heard that, I was like, damn, that's like pretty helpful. I think putting a number to it like that, it just makes your stopping point a lot more concrete. You can be more okay with shipping out an imperfect product, especially when you're starting out. Focusing on the quantity over quality, I think, is pretty important, because the way you get good is like producing something and iterating it and learning from it. I think if I didn't follow this rule, I probably would have only made like 10 videos this year and probably would have lost steam pretty early, because what I found is that you can always find something wrong with your work, especially with your videos. But actually, other people rarely notice these problems. They only seem to notice other weird little details. The third lesson has to do with role models. Having a list of role models have helped me in navigating my career and thinking in a lot of different ways. Up till now, most of my role models have been other successful architects and sometimes professors, mainly because becoming an architect has taken up such a huge chunk of my life. As I expanded my area of interest into things like entrepreneurship or spirituality or living intentionally, I realized that this list of role models was actually really limiting and not really helping me navigate certain decisions, and just like ultimately not really contributing to me becoming a more well-rounded person. It sounds obvious, but people who are great architects are not necessarily the best people to follow for some of these other things, like being a good friend or being a good person. And secondly, I realized that the super successful architects that I looked up to grew up in a time and economic climate that was like vastly different from mine. So as I progress in my career and into my other interests, I've been finding it harder to relate to them, especially since we're living in such unprecedented times. I've been trying to spend a little bit more time trying to build out a slightly more holistic list of role models that can guide me in these other areas of my life. The fourth lesson has to do with rest. My resting times were times I wasn't working by default, and I never spent a lot of time thinking about rest. But this year, I watched a few of my close friends and colleagues go through burnout, especially with me like starting a new YouTube channel and taking some of my other side activities more seriously. I realized that if I wasn't more intentional with my rest, my schedule wasn't gonna magically open up for me to rest, that my resting time didn't really help me recharge my batteries. I also realized that I was gonna burn out inevitably. By scheduling my breaks directly into my calendar as a non-negotiable activity, I know it sounds really simple, but it really helped me to re-strategize on my work and schedule things around it. And it also forced me to think about the activities that would actually help me recharge my batteries and help me optimize my rest. Sometimes that's going for a hike, and sometimes that's watching The Office for the 50th time. I also found that being able to see my resting days directly in my calendar gave me a kind of sense of control and a kind of appreciation for the work that I was doing. The fifth lesson has to do with chunking time. I've always automatically chunked time into 30-minute to 1-hour increments. For example, if I had a meeting from 8:30 to 9:30 and the meeting ended early, like at 9:10, I had another meeting scheduled for like 9:30, I would just like check my phone and like wait around for that meeting. Then I kind of came across this idea of chunking time into 15-minute increments. And I think I first came across this idea from Ali Abdaal. And I think that little shift in mindset has had a pretty transformational effect on me because I can actually be doing a lot more things during that time. So the next lesson has to do with handling adversities. This year, one of my colleagues that I'd been working pretty closely with quit with like a 1-week notice. And I ended up having to pick up a lot of her work because we'd been working very closely together on this one project for a long time as like two project architects and as like two brains on the job. This was kind of terrifying and a little bit stressful and kind of nerve-wracking and like all that good stuff. But a couple of weeks ago, the week before we left for holidays, the principals, they wanted to have like an early salary review. And basically they sat down and told me that they saw me really grow this year and kind of let me know how impressed they were about how I handle the situation and manage the project. They actually ended up giving me kind of a big salary raise, which was a big surprise because in my 4 years of working in the field, I'd never just like gotten a big raise without asking for it. This was kind of a shitty situation for me when it happened. Something like this has happened to me quite a few times over the past few years. One of them I've mentioned on the channel before. It was when I quit my job like just before the pandemic to go on a yoga retreat, LOL. And yeah, the market was like, it was not good. And I was like shitting my pants for like 3 months because I didn't know if I was ever gonna get hired as an architect again. That is when I decided to start this YouTube channel. Now it's giving me a pretty decent like side income. A lot of times, things that seem like really shitty situations end up being really cool opportunities. Let me know in the comments if something like this has happened to you before. I think when shitty situations happen, it's really easy to play the victim game. Being able to recognize adversities as opportunities is one of the most important life skills you can develop. The next lesson has to do with self-reflection. I think there's 2 types of activities. There's the activities that we do really enjoy doing, that we can kind of see ourselves doing for the rest of our lives. Let's call this our permanent activities. And so for me, that's things like designing, creating, teaching, traveling. And then there's the things that we do in order to get to something else. In architecture school, I really didn't like physics class, but it was something that I had to get through to get my degree and become an architect. Let's call these temporary activities. I noticed that things get a little murky as I started getting paid for both of these activities. In certain instances, these like temporary activities were more financially rewarding. I think if you really want to make progress towards a happier and like a more meaningful life, journaling regularly and like asking yourself what you really want out of life and like identifying these permanent versus temporary activities, it can really help you figure out what you need to double down on and what you need to change, or at least work towards changing. And I think it forces you to ask yourself things like what are you willing to sacrifice to continue doing these like permanent activities? Like what are the steps I need to take to make a full income out of these permanent activities? The 8th lesson has to do with how you think about time. So I first heard this idea from a book called The Happy Sexy Millionaire by Stephen Bartlett. And he says, well, there's 24 hours in a day, and let's say you sleep for 8 hours a day. So you have 16 waking hours, and 16 times 7 is 112 waking hours in a week. He thinks about life as a roulette table, and those 112 hours are your chips. You have 112 chips every hour, and you have to use it on something. There's a quote that I really like in this book. Time is both free and priceless. The person you are now is a consequence of how you used your time in the past. The person you'll become in the future is a consequence of how you use your time in the present. Spend your time wisely, gamble with it intrinsically, and save it diligently. Pretty smart guy. This resonated with me, especially this year, because everyone says that architecture is a lifelong profession where you're in the learning phase for a really, really long time. As I come closer and closer to the childbearing age, should I say, I've been thinking about this and like the finite nature of time. I think thinking about time like this at least helps you protect your time a little bit better so that you can focus on the things that have long-term intrinsic value to you. The 9th lesson has to do with confidence. You know that saying, fake it till you make it? I've used this mantra for a long time. When I was a fresh intern and I had to pretend to know my stuff in front of consultants and clients. I think this is okay when you're really early in your career, but actually I think it can kind of have a damaging impact on your life because it stops you from saying, I don't understand, and try to learn in that moment. Deep inside, you know you're a fraud. I think we have to be okay with our limits and okay with what we don't know. I think when you audit your skills, you'll find that, yeah, like I'm not good at these things. Let's say I was not really good at construction detailing. I can be good at other things. Like I can be really good at marketing. And so you'll feel more confident that you can bring something unique to the table. Also, I heard this quote, practice makes competence. Competence makes confidence. And I love this quote. This is the first year where I've noticed this shift in my mindset and my posture and how I interact with the world. And I think if you spend the time to actually learn things properly and become competent in your skills, confidence is going to come naturally. And the final biggest lesson I learned this year has to do with self-observation. I recently came across this book called The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama and this psychiatrist called Howard Cutler. And it's like an intro to spirituality, but even if you're not into that stuff, it actually gives you really practical solutions to problems that we kind of deal with every single day. There's some really good lessons in this book. The Dalai Lama, he's a pretty smart guy. But one of the things that's had a big impact on me this year is the idea of analyzing your thoughts and motives as if you're looking at yourself from a third person's point of view. One of the biggest breakthroughs for me was that I actually kind of had this like subconscious victim mentality, and that's been having a really negative impact on my life. And I was completely unaware of this until I started actively observing my thoughts and why I was feeling certain emotions. I think when we understand something or someone, we can feel a lot more empathy towards that person, even if it's a liar or a murderer. If we understand that person's upbringing and why he or she is the way he is, you're kind of like, okay, I mean, that's really shitty what he did, but I kind of understand. That's a long way of saying if we understand ourselves and why we are the way we are, we can come a little closer to loving ourselves for who we are. And I know that's kind of a mushy statement, so I apologize. I think if we truly want a happy and meaningful life, I would classify self-examination and self-compassion and like self-love as one of those keystone habits that's going to make everything else fall into place. Self-observation. game changer. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you guys have an awesome start to the new year. If you're interested in other self-help type of videos, I actually don't have any other self-help type videos on this channel, but I would highly encourage you to check out some of my other videos on architecture, which actually have a big impact on your happiness. I'll leave you some of my favorite videos right here. If you're interested in this topic and want more, let me know in the comments below. Also, if you want a monthly email from me where I share things I'm reading or learning, sign up for my newsletter. I hear it's pretty good. I'll leave the link below. And with that, I hope you guys have an awesome, incredible, fabulous start to a new year. But even if it's mundane, that's totally okay. New Year's is pretty overrated anyways. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.